Panoptica, Cisco's cloud application security solution, provides end-to-end lifecycle protection for cloud-native application environments. It empowers organizations to safeguard their APIs, serverless functions, containers, and Kubernetes environments. Panoptica ensures comprehensive cloud security, compliance, and monitoring at scale, offering deep visibility, contextual risk assessments, and actionable remediation insights for all your cloud assets. Powered by graph-based technology, Panoptica's attack path engine prioritizes and offers dynamic remediation for vulnerable attack vectors, helping security teams quickly identify and remediate potential risks across cloud infrastructures. Panoptica utilizes advanced attack path analysis, root cause analysis, and dynamic remediation techniques to reveal potential risks from an attacker's point of view. Visit panoptica.app to learn more today. That's panoptica.app.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. It is Aaron this week, and as Brian mentioned on our Sunday show, the heat wave here in the United States continues. We certainly hope everyone out there, please stay safe. And as always, please set aside some time to spend with your loved ones this summer as well. We're going to jump right into our topic. This week's topic is scaling Apple apps and how that really relates to Mac-centric tool chains, and DevOps workflows in general. And that is coming up right now.
Welcome back to the Cloudcast. I'm your host, Brian Gracely. And for many of you, you are a Mac user. You are a iPhone user. Your friends, your family, maybe you're living the defaults lifestyle and you know everything within your home is doing things with Apple. But oftentimes when we think about that ecosystem and how pervasive that ecosystem is, we sort of forget about what it looks like to have to build those applications, whether it's your company building an application that has an iOS app or, an Android app, an iOS app, or just, what it takes to be involved in that ecosystem. Because so often we think about Linux and we think about, AWS and we think about all these other things. And today we get a chance to really dive into what does it look like, what I'll sort of call the backend or the cloud side of running or being involved with the Apple ecosystem. And so very excited today to have Chris Chapman, who is CTO of MacStadium. Chris, welcome aboard. Great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We're excited to be here.
And you and I are both here in the South, so we're sort of in the throes of the humidity time of the season. So yeah, it's good to
be in a colder data center, honestly.
That's right. It's good time to be inside, even though it's nice and sunny outside.
Yeah.
Well, listen, like I said, welcome to the show. So before we dive into all things MacStadium, give us a little bit of your background because you've been around this space for a while. And then also, what are some of your focus areas as CTO of MacStadium?
Sure. I by trade, I was educated as a computer and electrical engineer, so sort of came from more of the embedded hardware side of the world, but then immediately pivoted and became a software engineer and a contractor for a big chunk of my life and did a lot of, enterprise software development for a while, then got really addicted to startups, which I guess I still sort of am in that mentality. I just like to build and create and, ended up running a company that built some software that ultimately got me acquired into MacStadium about 6 years ago. And that software was sort of a predecessor to some of the things we might talk about today with Kubernetes and orchestration and virtualization and all that kind of good stuff. And since then, I have been here and trying to figure out the wild world of Mac OS. I mean, prior to MacStadium, I've been probably since 2008 working with Mac as either my desktop or jamming it into a data center for some reason that nobody should really do. And then, I'm here now. I started building the software practice as I've taken more of the CTO landscape on. I'm kind of over everything from software to support to the software teams that build the products that we use to supply our customers to engaging with our product groups and things like that. And then just general show ponying around and explaining what it is the heck we do in this universe. So
yeah. You and I were talking a little bit before we started recording because I was trying to kind of wrap my head around, like I mentioned in the introduction, like we talk all the time about, what's in corporate data centers and, what's in the cloud and so forth. And then, like we said, there's this massive ecosystem of things we use every day with Macs and iOS and Mac OS and those types of things. And I sort of asked you this very naive question, which I'll ask again. Wait, what does it mean to be a Mac cloud? What does it mean to sort of run, what I would think of as like servers for Mac? Why would a bank care? Why do large organizations care? So give us, before we dive into a lot of the other things you do, give us sort of a broad sense of what is the world of MacStadium and the things that you guys provide for companies.
Yeah, we are sort of, as you alluded to, a data center, but unlike any other, we're built top to bottom on Apple hardware and Apple infrastructure. Now we do put a lot of the probably things you would see in a normal data center, enterprise infrastructure, Cisco networking, high-end storage, all that kind of good stuff to really build it up. But we are the scalable Mac data center, and the reason to your sort of the earlier question that matters is Apple is a really great individual experience product, and it's designed for a consumer. And it's, the idea of Apple servers is interesting because the closest thing they build to a server is a Mac Mini, it's or a Studio. It's all designed for a person on a desktop and a person in a workspace. So when you think about applying that to a data center, it doesn't. And so there's a ton of engineering into building this cloud that can serve that. And the reason it matters is because Apple wants to create the best experience for their users. So they want everything that you do for Apple or build for Apple to be done with Apple. So as businesses try to put something on phones or computers or whatever, somewhere along the build path, they have to use Apple hardware. And if you've ever built apps in a normal development, I'll say normal development environment. In a modern development environment, it's all AWS cloud, it's all ephemeral services or Azure, or you just click, you sort of software define your landscape, you build your things. That doesn't exist on the Mac side of the coin. It's get your laptop out, fire up Xcode, do your thing. And then as you get a team, how do you collaborate? How do you scale the hardware? How do you manage it? How do you deploy it? So we sort of address all of those concerns with what we're doing.
Yeah, no, and I think your statement of like Apple designs to build a great experience for the people that use the end product physically, engage with the product, and it got me thinking. And I think a decade more senior than you are, or I should say just older than you are. I mean, my first experience in dealing with some of this stuff was back when Apple had something called Apple Talk, which was this, sort of small scale network that was great at finding devices, finding file shares, finding printers. Everything was just named in normal sort of, human naming in English. And it was so amazingly easy to use as an end user. And then a year or so later, I was doing tech support and we were troubleshooting Apple Talk cases, and you were looking at, and you were looking at sniffer files and all these things, and it was just, massive amounts of broadcast storms and all this kind of back end stuff that you were like, God, I get how it's so easy for the user, but God, what a mess for whoever has to deal with networking and security and all that other stuff. So it kind of brings it full circle for me in terms of what you're dealing with.
Yeah, and to your point, that's the big challenge. As a company, we often get, first thing we hear is, man, that's cool, didn't think if that was a problem, but see how it is. And the second part is like, well, what does Apple think of you? And, especially as we grow our company and get in the investor world or anything, it's like, well, what if Apple decides to stomp you flat? Or they actually really like us because we support this crazy ecosystem. And again, their myopic focus is, and they'll literally tell you, we want to build devices that change people's lives. And I'm like, that's lofty.
That's big. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I want to support you in that effort. But to that end, they often, and it's not because they're not geniuses, they just don't think of the world in that way. They're often very perplexed by the enterprise development or build problems around using Apple. To your point, the back end complexity of it, because that's the last consideration. It's all about what happens to their user. So the fact that Chris can't find documentation, or the API is confusing, or maybe out of date, or there's all this other stuff going on, not their primary focus. And so people have a lot of challenges when it gets to that.
Right. So you guys ultimately then, and I don't mean to simplify this, like you sort of fill in for, people's their DevOps, their CI/CD, all those sort of things. Like how, and there's parts of what you do that are things that, people that listen to this show know a ton about, things like Kubernetes. But like if somebody said, hey, what does kind of Mac-centric DevOps look like? How do you explain that? What sort of technologies are you using to make it easier for people to build those those Mac-centric apps, or sort of to help change lives and stuff?
Yeah, well, I guess sort of taking it in parts, what CI and Mac DevOps looks like, it compared to the rest of the world, it's nascent. Meaning that really wasn't until very recently a focus for Apple. They sort of put out this Xcode cloud thing, and we had to think about what they were trying to do with that. And it's really them injecting some DevOps ideas into Xcode and an Xcode workflow. But Xcode in general is just your editor to build locally. So the idea of team collaboration and DevOps and all that kind of stuff was really sort of, again, sort of open source ecosystem generated with things like Brew, or things, like Fastlane, or people sort of cobbling a bunch of tools together to try to accommodate, hey, it's not just one guy on a laptop, it's 10 guys, and we're doing repeated pipelines, and we want to test and secure and redeploy. So it's been a challenge, because in this ecosystem, it's as much of an education play as it is a tooling play, because generally Apple developers aren't quite as familiar with CI/CD or DevOps as somebody that works in Amazon all day.
Gotcha.
What we try to do at MacStadium for sure is build the cloud in such a way that it lends itself to automation and DevOps practices. And then tools like we have Orca, which is our Kubernetes-based product. We actually ended up twisting things in a way where we can actually wrap Kubernetes around Mac resources and orchestrate it through a Kubernetes control plane, which is kind of crazy. But the reason that mattered was we wanted to start exposing a wider world of CI/CD and DevOps tools to the Mac ecosystem. So now you can plug in Jenkins, you can plug in GitHub Actions, you can plug in, name your favorite BuildKite, TeamCity kind of tooling into a Mac world. And then the developer can focus on DevOps from a dev perspective. The DevOps engineer can focus on sort of this automated, orchestrated infrastructure. They'll do what they expect it to do, like in any other cloud. And then everybody's kind of running down the path, versus this wacky world of sort of individual desktop apps where we're still file sharing across local networks and doing crazy stuff. So
yeah. If you don't mind, I want to dive in a little bit more on Orca. You were kind of the creator of Orca. I think that's how you came into the company, as I understand it.
Yeah, the software that myself and a few others developed got acquired, like I said, about 6 years ago. And it had some genesis in that we were partnered with MacStadium building things. And one of the challenges and frustrations we had was sort of orchestrating and automating this. You can get bare metal clouds from us, and a lot of people do for various reasons, but they also come with their own automation. Well, we were doing things where we didn't care about the automation part so much. We were trying to accomplish something else. But we ended up building an automation tool because we were so frustrated about not really having automation tools that were useful to us. And that was the genesis for Orca. And it sort of came from a need to want to easily virtualize Mac, which is not something that Apple focuses on. Apple focuses on the Apple device. They now provide a hypervisor framework in the new ARM architecture. But prior to that, and on the Intel platform, it was really what they called a Hackintosh. It was doing bad things to the Mac and really stripping it down and putting Linux on it, and then KVM and QEMU, doing all these kind of crazy things. Yeah, or VMwaring it. But your goal was, I'm just trying to turn this more into a peanut butter slathered, who cares about the hardware cloud sort of thing, so I can get my work done. That was kind of the genesis of Orca. So we went about going in the Kubernetes direction, because we were using it for some of the software. We're using Rancher at the time to do some of our software deployment and that kind of stuff. And then we figured, well, why can't you try to containerize a Mac OS? Well, there's lots of reasons you really can't, because it's not as sliceable and diceable. But we figured we could take the idea of containers as luggage handles and apply them to Mac VMs in a way to make it container-like and give the control plane the ability to move it around just like a container and do all the scheduling and resource management. And it turns out you can. So that's what Orca really became. And again, the Kubernetes piece really gave us an unlock to the whole Kubernetes ecosystem, which we saw as sort of winning the operating system of a data center race in our worldview. So it was like, hey, if we can tee into that and add Apple to that, it's going to give us a clearer path to tooling and technology and automation and infra as code capability that's sort of already really well defined there, and we just have to figure out the weird Apple part.
Gotcha. And now is that, I'm getting a little bit off track, but like, is that then technology, the Kubernetes piece, would you combine that with managing non-Mac environments as well? Or do you guys kind of keep that constrained to, obviously, your world is Mac, but are you just sort of extending Kubernetes to make that happen? Or how do those two worlds intersect, or do they?
Yeah, there's still sort of Kubernetes kind of things going on there. And we do always have customers that want sort of Mac and non-Mac capabilities. So they might have a private repository or a build server or something that they want to spin up, and that's not necessarily useful or good on Mac per se. So they'll want containers or a suite of security and remediation. So whatever they want, they can put that. So we have the concept of being able to sort of sandbox and spin up non-Mac as well as Mac capacity. And at MacStadium, we also provide infrastructure with non-Mac capacity that lets people sort of do the normal kind of cloud stuff if they need a couple of VMs for something or
Gotcha.
But we don't necessarily go to market to try to be better than Amazon or better than, Rackspace or somebody else at non-Mac compute, because that's really not where we focus, but we do have the ability to deliver it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, because the reality is even in the most sort of, intended to be pristine environments with anything having to do with IT, there's always going to be, one or two kind of other things that you need. It's, it's a security thing, it's an authentication thing, it's a whatever. So yeah, it makes sense that you guys have the ability to just bring in those other things as necessary, but that's not your differentiation.
Well, and Mac clouds are a little weird when it comes to clouds, in that Apple demands that you own or control the resource completely as the customer while you use it, which basically is a legalese way of saying no multi-tenancy. So
yeah.
It's a crazy world.
Well, yeah, it's the same sort of stuff Microsoft has done for a long time with Windows, where you can't sort of, you can't, like you said, can't multi-tenantize one license for something else.
Yeah.
I'm curious. So we tend to know, at least mostly, where cloud providers' responsibilities sort of stop and customer responsibilities sort of start. At least, people like AWS do a pretty good job of kind of drawing out a picture, and they say, these things we run, we manage for you. We'll make sure they're available. We'll upgrade them. Whether it's, whatever, right? Like, we'll make sure those are available. And then above that, that's your responsibility. And so they try and more or less define kind of the shared responsibility model. How do you guys think about your interaction with customers? Like, where does MacStadium stop and start, and what do your customers kind of expect from that? Where that line is drawn? Is it pretty common, or is it variable from customer to customer?
We try to keep it as consistent as possible. It does vary a little bit based on the product. We do provide a shared responsibility model as well, but kind of like I was alluding to before, sort of the odd aspect of our cloud is that everything from the network to the hardware is dedicated to the customer. So it is a siloed sort of thing versus a stratified kind of thing. And meaning we'll hand over a customer an environment and they will have full scope over the actual hardware. If it's virtualized, they'll have the firewall, they'll have that. So we will take care of all of those concerns internally, but they will, for example, get full right access to the firewall, so they could change the firewall rules if they wanted to. They get those kinds of abilities. So that's where the line gets a little blurry. And some customers want it to be set up and never think about it because they'll abstract it away from the software perspective. And others need us more involved to help them with imaging or changing out systems. We do upgrade stuff. We take care of course, power pipe and ping and all the normal things.
Sure.
When we get into Orca land, we take care of Orca support, the software and virtualization layer. We sort of really manage that Kubernetes layer because it's your own little Kubernetes cluster over your Apple stuff. But then the customer's responsible for any of their CI plugins or their software or their integrations and that kind of thing.
Yeah. How does, answer or don't answer, but like, how do things like data governance come into play? I know, we're seeing, certain countries around the world, especially in the EU, where, if you're in Germany, your data stays in Germany and so on and so forth. Like, how does that work with your world? And then like the Apple services, like, does Apple need to put some aspect of their service in your facility to help with that? Or do you run into those sort of problems, or is more or less, the customer's data eventually going to live like in an Apple service? Like I asked that again, sort of naively, like where, how does that impact your world in terms of governance and locality of data and things like that?
Yeah, it definitely affects us. We have an amazing security team who tries to keep really tightly wrapped. Our CISO keeps ahead of the game on that. So we try, we have GDPR certifications and all of these ISO 27001, all the SOCs and all those kinds of things. We do have facilities in Dublin and then the rest in the US. The nature of what we do often helps us avoid a little bit of it because a lot of customers aren't putting PII and things like that into the system. It's more they're building applications, and then wherever those go, we'll end up having the data concern. But we do have to deal with data privacy laws. We do have to deal with customer data scrubbing. We do have this customer portal where customers can sort of self-serve and interact, and that one is the one that's definitely starting to push the challenges there because, like you said, if you have an EU customer, they have different concerns, and any credit card information or user database stuff that they put in there is gonna press against us. So we do have to navigate that a bit, but less so on the Mac specific side, unless they end up building a customer data focused application on the Mac. And then we sort of have a way around that with it's your dedicated siloed environment, so you're still accountable for your data, and we just have to have really good data destruction policies and all those kinds of things.
Yeah. Okay. So where it's needed, the ability to create sort of private versions of the MacStadium cloud, at least virtualized, virtual versions of it and so forth. Very cool.
Yes, and then we try to geolocate if it's an EU customer. Ideally, they would be going to Dublin anyway, so that they're in the EU and they're in the zone, so it's not the US, but we have to work with them and their security teams quite a bit usually.
Yeah, no, makes sense. I'll ask you one last question, and then I'll let you get out of here. What are just sort of at a high level, what are some of the best ways that companies take advantage of your expertise in this space, your ability to automate things for them? What's the typical sort of entry point for people, and then where do they typically expand in terms of going, oh, okay, you saved me a ton of time in this. I didn't realize that there was so much involved with that. Like, what are the sort of best ways companies engage or take advantage of all the things that MacStadium does?
Yeah, well, and I like the way you asked the question because one of the words in there was kind of the key to it all. I think what we do better than most is we do encapsulate expertise. Mm-hmm. So again, we're solving this weird problem of how to make Apple be an enterprise, lights out, cloud-based sort of thing. And everybody that's coming to us, and the typical journey we see is someone either starts small, or if they don't start small, is still sort of on your desk or a DIY kind of thing. They've cobbled together a way to make this work for their team. They've put it in a closet. They've maybe tried some open source virtualization, but that is not their day job. They're trying to just get something done. And all we do is focus on the ever-moving landscape of Apple. All we do is focus on how to apply it to enterprise and build and dev and ops. And all we do is build tools that focus around that problem. So I think as soon as people sort of reluctantly, and it's also sort of a cost and I'm a smart engineer, I can do it myself sort of thing that happens with anybody as anybody's trying to go to the cloud, like, I don't, I'll just. Right. But it becomes this overbearing problem, and they're like, fine, I'll do it. Maybe it costs a little extra. But I think when people get in, they find like, oh my gosh, you just turned Mac infrastructure into software-defined infrastructure. You just turned a desktop thing into a CI platform that the whole team can just sit here and focus on code and not focus on this thing. And I have to stress less when Apple comes out next week at WWDC and says, it does this now and it's shaped like a starfish. Good luck putting it in a rack. And
it's a lot of I don't know what I don't know type of thing.
Right. Or they do what Apple does. They make the experience better with a software update. But as we've all experienced with our phones and everything else, you you get those and it does some great stuff, and you also go, wait, where did that go, and how come that doesn't do this? And for software builders, it's like, holy cow, they took this thing away that I was relying on. How do I get around that now? What's the replacement for it? And we have a lot of that knowledge and expertise baked in, both at the physical layer and at the software layer. And I think as people connect with us, they realize that that's a capability because they use it in the tooling, but then they also start to open up and ask a lot of questions and go, hey, we're really trying to do this. What do you think? And you're like, oh, well, there's a way to do that. And this is the way.
Yeah, no, very, very cool. Very cool. Good stuff. Well, for me, individually and on behalf of Aaron and I, thank you for kind of opening us up to this world. Like I said, I feel like I deal with Mac technology, Apple technology every day, but, understanding how all these applications get to me has always been a little bit of a black hole. So you filled in a ton of detail for me. Hopefully for people who, are in this world, or, it's part of what you have to do. It's opened up some windows and some ideas for you as well. Cause like you said, there's part of what everybody does that you do have a tendency to be like, I probably could figure that out. Or, there's a forum, if I read enough stuff, I could figure it out. But, there's certain things that just, having access to that expertise is so important. And you realize it just, it makes your life that much easier, which again, aligns so much to what Apple tries to do as well. So, Chris, thank you so much for the time. I mean, if folks want to engage with your team, what's typically the best way to get started, or just, kind of engage with that expertise?
Well, we're very web friendly, so definitely go to our website at MacStadium.com. You can pretty much instantly get on and start trying to access the Mac stuff and the expertise there on the website. It's also very easy to contact one of our salespeople from there, and we love to get on the phone and chat about the problem and quickly get you into something that works at that point. We also have a tool called Orca Desktop coming out in the next week. Yep. It is a free forever, download it on your Mac and play with it, and shows you sort of desktop virtualization and gets you into this weird world of what it might be like if you were to use Orca or anything else in MacStadium, and hopefully help solve problems about how to play on your Mac without breaking it when you're messing around.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and I think just with this new era of AI and all the hardware that may come with that and other things, I think you guys might end up being busier on a whole nother level here that might happen, which is probably a good thing for you. You guys are the experts at that stuff.
Working with a lot of people on things that have that in the title and places. So
absolutely,
it's pretty exciting.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, listen, Chris, on behalf of Aaron and I have all of us on the Cloudcast, thank you so much for the time today. We really, really appreciate it. Learned a ton. Folks, with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I want to, again, thank Chris for his time. Thank all of you for listening. Thanks for everybody who listens, who gives us feedback, who, rates us on all the places you get your podcasts and sends us feedback. Show at thecloudcast.net. Send us your questions, send us your comments. So thank you for that. With that, I'm going to wrap it up, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.